Well, good morning. Yes, wonderful. I tell you, this morning is a good one, and I know it was said in the prayer. We're thankful for the sun coming out and that rain that watered the earth. But this morning at the 8:15, I felt like I was in Scotland. That's a daily thing. We're walking in the rain. I was covered in rain. It was glorious. And so being here today to worship God in spirit and in truth, it is truly a blessing for us. But I want to, before we get into what our focus is for Mission Sunday, I want to mention, I'm so thankful for our visitors. We have a family that came from our breakfast with the bunny. I almost said pizza with the bunny. We did pizza with Santa. I got it mixed up. And also we have the Vigil family with us, and I think it's all 18 of you. Is that right? Just so thankful for Riley and for Harley, and Riley just graduated yesterday, and so just meeting your family is just so important, and y'all have been a great blessing for us. We have another visitor that's here this morning, but is online, and my dad messaged me this morning, and I'm going to try to get through this. My aunt is, the hospice is called, and so she is in Rogersville, Alabama, and she's sitting in a bed, and she wanted to worship this morning. And so, Aunt Judy, I love you so much. And I tell you, I want you to know something about Aunt Judy. She is my grandfather's sister. And my grandparents, they went to New Zealand, planted a church in New Zealand, and she would tell me, like you always said, that Richard, he went into all the world. We just sent him. And I'm just so thankful for Aunt Judy for you sending us to Scotland and all that work. And I want to read a passage. It says, Paul said this, I'm already being poured out as a drink offering, and the time of my departure has come. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. And I'm so thankful that Judy Hogan can be added to this passage. So thankful for you. Love you all so much. But I think this is so important that we're looking at Paul's end of his journey in this life. But what we just read about is the beginning of that journey. And so it just fits so well. And so I'm thank y'all for giving me that moment with my family. But we're all family in the church. And I want us to look at Acts 13 as we saw in the reading. And Kyle, thank you for bringing that reading for us. If you will, look at verse 2. It says, while they were worshiping the Lord and fasting, the Holy Spirit said, set apart for me Barnabas and Saul for the work to which I have called them. Notice, this is the beginning of their call. We just read about the end of that call. And here, they're in the middle of worship. We're in the middle of worship. And our focus today is Mission Sunday. And for those of you visiting, what we're doing is every year, obviously annually, we gather together on the first day of the week, every first day of the week. But one of those weeks out of the year is dedicated to our Mission Sunday. And all of the giving from the membership is given to all of our missionaries, and you see them represented on this screen. And so we're going to go through and we're going to look at those who are represented through our Mission Sunday. And so every penny of what is given today goes to keep them in the mission field. And so I wanted to also look at chapter 14, and if you will, look at verses 24 through 27. It concludes the picture of a missionary who is sent. They're supposed to return. But because of COVID, because of regulations, it's been very challenging for all 10 of our families that are overseas to be able to come back. They've not been able to. And so we've done something a little bit different this year. Our elders, our deacons, we've had several members who have been calling our missionary families and actually doing reports on them. And so we've been doing that on Wednesday nights, and we have those recorded. I want to encourage you, go back and watch those recordings. Take part in them on this Wednesday night, and we're going to continue until we have completely heard from all of our missionaries. And so I'm excited about the works that they are doing. And that's the whole point. Because if you will, look at Acts 14 and verse 24 beginning. It says, then they passed through. So this is Paul and Barnabas. Again, the beginning of their missionary journey. The first missionary journey. They passed through Pisidia and came to Pamphylia. And when they had spoken the word in Perga, they went down to Italia. And from there they sailed to Antioch, where they had been commended to the grace of God for the work that they had fulfilled. And so they completed the first missionary journey. And they came back to the congregation that sent them. You see, that's a biblical concept. Again, it was during the worship that they were then sent. And look at verse 27. And when they arrived and gathered the church together, that's the people, the church, and the assembly assembled. They declared all that God had done with them and how he had opened a door of faith to the Gentiles. Notice they declared all that God had done and that he had opened a door of faith to the Gentiles. And it is exciting when you hear of the doors that are opened for the good news. And so that's the focus that we're going to have in the time we have remaining. In the first place, Eddie Clower. In fact, Wednesday night, one of our shepherds, one of our elders, Saul Godwin, he presented a great presentation by Eddie Clower with Truth for Today and what they're doing with World Mission, their World Mission School. And he mentioned something I'd like to relay. You know, what they're doing with the World Mission, the school for Truth for Today, might be the best example of going into all the world, because what they're doing is they're reaching so many more people than I can, than you can. Well, we can by helping and supporting this. And that's what today represents. You know, notice he actually mentions three different main things that they focus on, three different steps that I like to mention. The first place has to do with the written word. They mail out every month to 32,000 of their native missionaries. 32,000, and that's not a typo. And what's interesting, I've got a picture of those mail-outs. Each one of these, you see Daniel, Revelation, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Psalms. Those are expository studies, just literally going through what is the Bible saying here. And they send these every month to 32,000 of these missionaries, these preachers. They're actually able to take this and then teach the message to those in their communities. And it's powerful. And so this is just one represented out of the 32,000. The second step is they're trying to cover the world with the concept of the life of Christ. They don't just do those booklets. They also make these volumes that are the Truth for Today commentaries. Many of you have this set. What they're doing, in 10 years, they have divided up the world into 10 sections. And out of those 32,000, they are sending to each section these 2 volumes and making sure every missionary has this in his hand. And so the message of Jesus can get to the lost. And so that's this idea that they're doing there. And the third place is they have an online school, a learning center, and they have 366 courses. And in fact, he mentions, get on there. They've got it in English, and we can learn as well and grow and be sharpened as well. But they have it in 23 different languages. And what's great is you can get online and you can literally click. I was going through it. I got it in Korean. I got it in Japanese and French and Spanish. And it was amazing. At a click of a button, everything was translated immediately. Well, that didn't happen overnight. Again, this is something that Eddie Clower has dedicated his life to making this possible. It's 93% of the Bible in these studies that they are offering to the world. And so, again, what Eddie is doing is phenomenal. And that brings us to Belize. We have that personal connection to Eddie, but we also have a personal connection to Belize. For 53 years, we have been involved every year going to somewhere in Belize to try to encourage and strengthen a congregation there. For the last 3 years, we've not been able to go because of COVID and because of the regulations, but that doesn't mean we haven't stopped in our work with them. In fact, we are helping the work in Corozal and Belize City. Specifically, we are helping the church in Corozal, where David Diego is and his brother Richard, but also in Belize City, where David Smith is and Kenneth Bennett. It is incredible the work that they're doing, because Kenneth, he's in his late 70s, and he is going out. And if he hasn't had a Bible study in one Bible study a week, he is upset with himself. And I'll tell you, it is encouraging the work that they are doing. And so something Gary Cosby has done, I want to encourage you, go back and watch what Gary has presented. We did that a couple weeks ago on a Wednesday night, and those are on our YouTube page. And you can see all of the work. I had a lump in my throat. I mentioned at the early service, the whole time he was doing it. It was powerful to see the work that is viable and strong and the need that we have still there in Belize. In fact, something Gary and I are going to be doing, we're planning on this fall, is we're going to try to do a preacher's workshop. I'm going to conduct a preacher's workshop in Belize City. It's central to the country. And we're inviting all of the preachers and missionaries and the leaderships to come to Belize City, and we will help with teaching how to study, how to put a lesson together, and the concept of deacons, elders, worship. And so we're going to be working on that possibly in October. So please pray for that effort. So Joshua Dykes, talk about a personal example, a personal connection. Joshua Dykes grew up here from the ground up, and he decided early on that he wanted to be a missionary. He was a youth intern here with the youth program, but then he also became a preacher intern and a missionary intern with me, and so he had to put up with me for 3 summers. And we worked together to help prepare him for missions. And so what he's doing now, he's in Swartz Creek Church of Christ in Michigan, and he's working with the congregation there for 2 years. The preacher and elder there is the former missionary to Iași, Romania. So he's trying to teach Josh the ropes. He's teaching him Romanian. He's trying to teach him the culture, just how it's going to work and how they're going to prepare him to go. And so, yes, he is going to Iași. So it will be Josh in Iași. And that will be something we need to pray for Josh in Iași. And I'm excited for the work that he's striving to do. We spent about an hour just this week discussing the work there and trying to encourage him and sharpening him, and he's sharpening me. And so this gentleman that is next to him, he actually studied with. He was baptized into Christ, and so he's doing a great work there at Swartz Creek. Now this is the Treats, Joey and Tammy Treat, and in fact they work with the Pacific Island Bible College. So the Treats and also the Fergusons are the families we're going to discuss here now. The Pacific Island Bible College, the PIBC, this is something that my Aunt Judy sent my grandfather and to work with the PIBC and my uncle Robert Martin in that work, and they've been doing that for, well, it's almost 50 years now, and so, but for the past 25, they have focused on the PIBC. And so the Treats are a part of this. We have about 15 to 16 instructors in that college. And so the Treats, they work in Chuuk, Palau, and Guam. Try to say that 5 times fast. And so they're living in Guam as of last year. And so what they're doing is they're trying to encourage these 3 islands, but also the congregations that are there, trying to strengthen them. And what's been interesting, and if you read through their reports, when they got into Guam, see, that's a U.S. territory. There's a U.S. air base there. And so they were able to worship with a congregation that meets on the base. Well, when COVID hit, regulations changed, and they weren't allowed to get on the base. So the congregation on the base decided, you know what, we need to move into the town. And so what's interesting, there's a house church that had been meeting across town. They've merged, and they asked Joey to be their preacher. And so Joey is preaching for this congregation. And in fact, Rob Whitaker, who came to work with us with Back to the Bible, he was able to work with Joey, and they've gone through the Back to the Bible seminar, and he has now become the Rob Whitaker of Guam, and he is excited, and it's incredible work that they are doing. So I want to encourage you to pray for Joey and Tammy Treat and their children, but also the Fergusons. Nathaniel and Rachel. Rachel is actually, her dad was a deacon here at one time, and so Nathaniel, he has grown up in Atlanta. I've known him since he was a little boy, but the Fergusons are doing a work in the South Pacific that might be the most important for specifically the Pacific Island Bible College. They are in charge of 23 different islands. That's 15 countries that are represented. And so what they do is they're going and they're doing college courses for the Pacific Island Bible College. And it's very similar to what Eddie Clower does, but it's more boots on the ground. They're trying to go and they have these courses with Christians there. And they're trying to strengthen the indigenous people, and that it's led by the indigenous people, not by Americans. And so the blessings of this is with the 23 different islands, for instance, 15 countries represented. What's interesting is he can go to these main islands like Guam or Palau or Chuuk. He can go to these main islands, and there are so many. There's tens of thousands of islands in the South Pacific. Some are not inhabited, but some are. And so those individuals, they need supplies. You can run out very quickly on a very small island. So what they'll do is they will float into the island. They will row into the island. They will spend a while working and gaining supplies to take back to their island. Many of them have obeyed the gospel and brought the gospel with them. Some of them are the first members of the church on that specific island. So it's a model that's trying to reach the entire the South Pacific. And so it's great. This family, right now as we speak, are in Palau. And this is the third since regulation has opened that the Fergusons have been able to get in to the country. But this is also his family. Rachel and the children are there as we speak. So please pray for their efforts. This is a lifelong commitment that they have made. And so when my Uncle Robert is no longer here in this world, they're passing that torch on to the young bucks. And so I'm excited for all the work that they are doing, and it is vital. And so that brings us to Kyle Budd. You know, we talk about resources with Eddie Clower and with the PIBC, but also Kyle Budd is with Apologetics Press, AP. And they work on any of the hard questions. It was mentioned that we've got Q&A coming up. Any difficult questions that you have, I guarantee you I'm going to be coming to this resource. And so it's important that when we have struggles with the concept of the existence of God, we have struggles concerning just the concept of Christianity in general, we have this as a resource. And Kyle has been a great blessing. And especially for our youth. It seems that more and more today, our society has become more and more cynical concerning Christianity. And they're giving true Bible answers concerning the existence of God and apologetics of Christianity. And so the next step I'd like for us to focus on is Alex Coggins at Jefferson Christian Academy. You know, we have a mission field in our backyard in Irondale that is Jefferson Christian Academy. And a mission field needs a missionary, and so Alex Coggins has stepped to the plate for the last 2 years. He decided to become a teacher, a Bible teacher there at Jefferson Christian Academy. And what's wonderful is, well, he's chosen to do this during the hardest time to be a teacher that I can think of in human history, in living history. And so he's doing a great job. And in the last 2 weeks, he has decided that he's taken the Back to the Bible information and he's brought it to the middle school and high school. And they're going through the Back to the Bible material. So please pray for those efforts. In Matthew 19 and verse 13 through 15, we've got people bringing children to Jesus. And the disciples say, take these children away. But Jesus says, do not forbid them. For of such is the kingdom of heaven. He says, let the little children come to me and do not forbid them. Well, today, how are the children going to come to Christ? It's through us going to them. And Alex Coggins is doing a fantastic work. In fact, he's putting together a report that he's going to be bringing on their behalf. Now I want to talk about the McDonalds, Graham and Elizabeth McDonald. Many of you know their work in Cumbernauld, Scotland. It's a suburb of Glasgow. And the work that they do is mainly with youth as well. They have a youth outreach for inner city children, but because of COVID regulation, that has been canceled for the last couple years. That's back on. Their camp is back for July 1st, so please pray for those efforts. But what's interesting about Graham and Elizabeth, I met them when I was 12 years old. I met Graham. And so this large brotherly mind talks to me and says, I want you to come to Scotland with me. And I was blown away by him. And in fact, when I was 19, I was invited to come and be a preacher and preacher intern with them, a missions intern. And so of these group of children, you might be able to spot me, the 19-year-old at the top there. But no, I could not have grown even one hair on my face at that time. But working with them, in fact, that prepared me for being able to put together a program to help Josh when he was our preacher intern. It was the same model that I went through. And so think about the full circle. And in fact, if it wasn't for the work that Graham and Elizabeth did with me, for instance, I left there, came back to school, and I dropped art, and I stuck with Bible, and I may not be a minister today if it wasn't for their influence. And so I'm so thankful for the work that they're doing and for the influence of others. This is the most recent picture. They had an event together. They were allowed to be together. This is the masks that obviously they're all wearing, but this was just a few weeks ago. And so, again, it's very heightened as opposed to where we are today. And so they're striving to do all they can to be together. I want to also mention the Taylor family. It's Leslie and Sarah Taylor. They're in Japan, in Matsudo, Japan. This is a suburb of Tokyo, the Matsudo Church of Christ. It's Matsudo, not pseudo. It's not a false Church of Christ. It's Matsudo. That was mentioned to me earlier, Matsudo. They took me to the mat on that. Okay, but the idea of the Taylors and what they're doing, I've known the Taylors, but this was actually through our own Yoshi Sugita and Karen. Yoshi is one of our deacons, and he is in connection with Leslie. He is an American, but both of them speak Japanese, and he is preaching for a Japanese congregation outside of Tokyo. That in and of itself is a feat, and it's incredible. But I went to school with Leslie and with Sarah. Sarah and I were in Interface together as freshmen, and Leslie and I played racquetball together, so I never imagined that they would go on to do what they're doing, but I'm so proud of their work. And so he mentions some of the focuses they've had, that COVID has been obviously a challenge, but there are also some interesting dynamics that are challenging in Japan. For instance, the Japanese and the work ethic with the men specifically, they will work long hours, 6 days a week, and Sunday is their only day off. So it's very hard for Leslie, that's Les, to reach out to these men. So Sarah has been the key contact. He mentions that she is the door for their family. But if you'll turn to Acts chapter 18 and verse 24, he mentions this about Sarah. It says, "Now a Jew named Apollos, a native of Alexandria, came to Ephesus. He was an eloquent man, competent in the Scriptures. He'd been instructed in the way of the Lord, and being fervent in spirit, he spoke and taught accurately the things concerning Jesus, though he knew only the baptism of John. He began to speak boldly in the synagogue, but when Priscilla and Aquila heard him, they took him and explained to him the way of God more accurately." So Aquila and Priscilla, they're a husband and wife team, and they hear that there is something he's teaching that was not right. They took him aside privately, and they taught him the way more clearly. Aquila could not have done it without Priscilla. Priscilla could not have done it without Aquila. And so what Leslie says is Sarah is his Aquila to his Priscilla. Priscilla to his Aquila. Sorry, I got that one wrong. But it's powerful that he brings this out in their most recent report. And he mentioned that because it was challenging for him to reach people in the community through their tennis, not racquetball anymore, is through tennis. Their children are taking tennis lessons, and through that they've been able to reach people in the tennis club, and they're coming to worship with them. And people that are from the school, and it's all contacts that Sarah's made, he's able to then turn around and study with them. So it's encouraging to know of the work that they're doing all the way in Japan. And want to mention finally the Kaisers. Many of you know Barton Kaiser and his wife and children. They're more known for their work in Cusco, Peru. They spent over a decade in Cusco, Peru, where you supported them. But what I find interesting about their work is they were prepared to be able to do the work that they're doing now in Charleston, North Carolina, because of the work they did in Cusco, Peru. They are in charge of a Hispanic work in Charlotte, North Carolina. And so Peru, again, prepared them. And so from Cusco to the Carolinas, that's the focus that they have. But their main ministry is to use the Bible to teach English as a second language. And all of their evangelistic studies and their visitors for worship have come through these English studies using the Bible. And at the last I saw, they had 70 that were enrolled for that course. And so it's great, and slowly the church is growing, and in fact, the new Christians are taking more of a leadership within their worship. Barton wrote, "In Charlotte, North Carolina, we see a vision for a series of multi-generational and multicultural church plants. Our prayer is that many who are lost will come to know God through Jesus Christ. We could not serve in the kingdom without your generous support." So it's really about seeking doors of opportunity to reach people. And if you will, turn back to Acts chapter 14. You'll recall what Paul said when he gathered the church together, all of the people together there in Antioch that had sent them. He declared all that God had done with them. I have not been able to declare all. I've barely even scratched the surface of what's being done. It's kind of been a tall order to try to present that in the time allotted. So I'm thankful for your bearing with me on that. But it's interesting, it was through the opening of a door of faith to the world. That's what we're striving to do. And I'm reminded of our own doors for this building. This building is just a building. But the church is the people. And these doors have opened up, and some wonderful people have walked through them. And we're so thankful for the Vigil family and for just God being at work in all of that, and that you're here. And we want you to know that we're here to encourage you and to be a strength even when you're in Wyoming or Greece or Italy. But also through our Breakfast with the Bunny, for y'all to come. Just being able to be here, it's important to find a group of people that we love one another, we connect with one another. That's what the church is all about. That's what Christ is. And that's what happens when God is at work. It's not about the individuals, but it's about God being at work. And so with Mission Sunday, with the focus that we have, what we're purposing to give, the plan is God is going to use that to keep these missionaries in the field. But also, we may potentially have others that are striving to get there, but they don't have the money raised. We need people like Judy Hogan. We need people like you that are willing to send and give generously in this way. It keeps the gospel being proclaimed all over the world. And so at this moment, we have another door that is open. We have an invitation we offer at the end of every sermon, and this has been a unique one. I know it's not like a normal one, but we sing a song of encouragement, and it's simply an invitation to encourage you to come if there is something we can do to help you, to encourage you, to pray with you. But maybe you are not a child of God, and you, through understanding the message, getting back to the Bible, we need to repent of our sins, confessing that Jesus is Lord, being baptized in His name for the forgiveness of those sins. We realize He will add us to His church. And our desire is to find His church through the Scriptures, not the yellow pages. Making sure that we're following them within their context to understand what the early church did and do that to the best of our ability. If we can encourage you, please respond now while together we stand and while we sing.